Last week, huge indictment against former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan, and the implications and the fallout obviously is going to be something that's a point of contention heading into the November election. Just how all this plays into that, though, got to look at all these different angles. It is the WMAY Morning News Feed. I'm Greg Bishop, 711. And the listener contact line, 217-629-7970. You can also email bishoponair@gmail.com. So, former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan indicted on 22 counts last week, ranging from racketeering to bribery to a variety of other things. 22 counts in all, alleging that Madigan Enterprise, a 10-year-long scheme with Madigan enriching himself and his political associates in illegal ways, the allegations allege. Of course, Madigan denies any wrongdoing, and he says that the federal government's trying to criminalize the standard constituent service of offering up job recommendations. But those job recommendations could be considered little to do nothing. And if that's something conveyed to a jury, that could be pretty interesting. But talked with a couple of individuals getting a little bit more context to the broader picture here about corruption, and in particular about how these things play out in court, and then also when it comes to the ethical questions. So I connected with a professor at St. Xavier University, David Parker. He is an expert in corruption, white-collar crime, political corruption, and he teaches about it and all the ins and outs. And I touched base with him to talk a bit about what to expect here moving forward, and how this trial is going to play out, because Madigan is facing an arraignment this week in federal court, and he's got 5 attorneys lined up, and millions of dollars are going to be used to defend Madigan. So with his team of 5 high-priced attorneys, you can see that they're ready to go in and claim Madigan's defense, while you've got taxpayers on the other side funding the federal prosecutors. And it's going to possibly be a long, protracted court battle. Or is it going to be something that, we see a plea deal? Who knows? But David Parker asked him about just overall what this means for the ongoing court case and how it could possibly play out.
Yeah, getting to the trial and all. I think it's me leaving all. The big thing I think what it's going to come down to is there any type of plea deal worked out? I mean, this is an important step in restoring the public trust in our political and legislative system, our political and judicial systems. So this is an important step in restoring that public trust. And it sends the indictment sends a very strong, important message that these types of abuses are just, people are tired of them. They're not going to be tolerated anymore. I mean, this is, we're dealing with a condemnation of a system. I think J.B. Pritchard said it's a condemnation of a system that's been infected with self-dealing and corruption. And so I think, a lot of people are looking at this as, is it really going to go to trial? Are we going to see some type of conviction, or is it going to be, there's a plea deal and he kind of walks away in shame, but different people are going to have different opinions, this is like the tip, some people are probably thinking this is the tip of the iceberg, right? I mean, you've got to the pinnacle, but, or like if you've done some really strong pruning, but you got a tree that survives with a good root system. And what do you do with that? I mean, that's a good analogy too. You've done a lot of good, serious pruning, but if you got a healthy root system with a toxic plant, what are you left with?
So again, that was David Parker, a professor at St. Xavier University in Chicago, dealing with white-collar crime and corruption and federal investigations. Just getting a little bit of kind of context of sorts of what we could see. And when I talked with Parker, he did outline that it's going to be crucial, whatever federal prosecutors bring by way of evidence. And some of that evidence, as we've seen laid out in the indictment, documents, words. We don't know if it's going to be actual tapes. They wouldn't reveal that much, but they say they've got the documents and the words that people have spoken in order to make the case. But you also have several individuals in this scheme that could provide to be material witnesses, including a former ComEd official, Fidel Marquez. He's pleaded guilty, as has a former Chicago alderman. In corruption investigations. So how all this is going to, again, play out, very, very interesting. And that's just the courts. What about ethics? And what about what's happening at the State House? Now, Republicans last week, they said they tried to hold Madigan accountable with a special investigative committee. Outside of that, you talk to some, and for years at the State House, whenever there's been a corruption investigation revealed or charges issued, some leaders have said, listen, there's already laws on the books that holds bad actors accountable. But that's waiting for the Justice Department to do their job. That's waiting for Illinois law enforcement to do their job. And interesting that we haven't seen any Illinois law enforcement go after Madigan for these charges. It's really just been the federal prosecutors that have leveled the accusations here. But I talked with Elisa Kaplan from Reform for Illinois, and she laid out that there's a lot of things that should have happened, including the Special Legislative Investigative Committee that Republicans brought forward. They did develop some emails that ultimately showed some questionable things, like, one of Madigan's associates emailing a ComEd official saying, hey, what jobs do you have for our friend? So those types of things definitely spelled out back in November of 2020, but Democrats blocked and ended that Special Legislative Investigative Committee. Kaplan says that was definitely a missed opportunity in holding Madigan accountable, at least politically, at the State House.
I think it could have been, and I think it could have served other important purposes. For example, I think it's important for the legislature to just take a position on this and show that they're looking into it, and they're taking some accountability for the actions of their own members. So I think it would have sent an important signal for the legislative committee to really sink their teeth into this. I also think that not every unethical behavior rises to the level of a crime, and the legislature should be able to make people accountable for behavior that's not necessarily criminal. In this case, it turns out that it was, but even if it hadn't been, not necessarily criminal, but still perhaps a breach of the public trust. I think what we saw with that legislative committee, and I do believe that it obviously could have been handled better, is that we need independent oversight of the legislature as well. And this has been a persistent problem, right? We have this legislative inspector general's office where every person who holds it says that it's not strong enough or independent enough to actually do its job of investigating and ethics complaints and holding officials accountable for ethics complaints, because it has to ask permission to do everything from the legislators it's supposed to oversee. And that's the fox watching the hen house. This is another area where you have to restructure the system so that there's checks and balances. And right now we're really missing that.
We'll talk about other things that Kaplan says still linger despite Madigan being indicted, and that deals with campaign finance issues. So we'll get to that, and also hear a little bit of what was said on the House floor last week from State Representative Dan Calkins. That's coming up here on the WMAY Morning